Welcome back, Honors. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your flipped classroom and our continuing discussion of the lead up to World War I. So we are now getting into our World War I stuff, and I can't wait to say it, and I can't wait to talk to y'all about it. And we're finally reading our book, right? We're starting All Quiet on the Western Front. Tonight, y'all are going to be reading Chapter 1. But let's not dawdle. Let's use this 15 minutes appropriately, and let's get after it a little bit, right? So the thing we left off in talking about in class is we were discussing the alliances, right? We talked about the main causes of World War I, militarism, alliances, and imperialism, nationalism. Now we're getting into those alliances. We're going to talk about the nitty-gritty parts of the alliances. And where we started off with these alliance systems is we started off by talking about how the original one was this thing called the League of Three Emperors, right? And it was Germany, Austria, and Russia. But the problem with this alliance is it's going to be on really, really fragile grounds, right? At one point, Russia left it for a little while, and then Bismarck convinced them to come back. But it was all due to the fact that Russians consider themselves different from many other Europeans, right? Your Western Europeans, which include like Germans, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, British, like all those guys, are very different from Slavic Europeans, which are mostly over in the eastern area of the continent, right? You got places like Russia, and then also Belarus, Serbia, and another area that we'll talk about a lot, probably hopefully in this flip as well, the Balkans, right? And the Balkans is this southern little chunk of Europe and stuff like that. It's got a lot of Slavic nations inside of it, including Albania, Montenegro, Kosovo, Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia, all those different areas, right? Well, Russians had this really, really intense feeling at the time that they thought it was their job to protect other Slavic nations and Slavic people. So they don't like the fact that the Austrians actually control several of those places. For example, Bosnia was under their control. It was a part of their empire, and the Russians don't like that. And they want them to let them go, and Austria's refusing, right? So the thing about it, though, as well, there were some wars and stuff. There was the Russo-Turkish War and a couple of other things as well. But everything really starts to hit the fan when this guy comes into power. That dude right there is Kaiser Wilhelm II, right? He is the son of Kaiser Wilhelm I, the guy that was the Kaiser of Germany when Bismarck was in power, right? When Bismarck was the chancellor and was unifying Germany together, Kaiser Wilhelm I was the one doing all that stuff. Well, this is his dead-armed son who comes into power, and I mean that literally. He had his left arm just hang limply by his side, and he couldn't feel anything in it, and it just kind of like moved, like never moved around and stuff like that. But Kaiser Wilhelm literally came into power, and he actually fires Bismarck. Ever since he was a young kid, he really didn't like Bismarck whatsoever and resented him and thought that he puppeted his dad the entire time. So he comes in and actually pushes Bismarck out, doesn't renew the alliance with Russia, and Russia leaves. So yeah, Russia leaves the alliance of three emperors. And what's going to end up happening is France, like the cunning shark that they are, doesn't like Germany at this point and does have a rivalry with them, decides to make an alliance with Russia, closing Germany in on two sides. Dude, you are so flipping dumb. What is the matter with you? Don't do that. And honestly, in the long run of things, if everything would have been left up to Bismarck, everything would have been fine. But the fact that this guy's in charge is going to help us lead to World War I in a really big way, right? So the very first alliance that's going to actually fight in the war, the League of Three Emperors actually fell apart. The very first alliance that's going to fight in the war, though, is known as the Triple Alliance, right? The Triple Alliance is actually between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. But what we're going to need to do really, really quick, though, is you're going to need to put a star next to Italy, right? Because Italy actually isn't going to stay in this alliance for very long. They're actually, when the war breaks out, going to declare themselves neutral, and then they're going to switch to the other side, right? So the Italians don't even really stay in the Triple Alliance for very long. They actually get replaced later on by the Ottoman Empire, right? The Ottoman Empire actually joins up with them in October of 1914, after the war already starts. But the big thing about it is France and Germany are enemies after France lost the Franco-Prussian War, and also ever since Napoleon, when Napoleon was putting French occupational soldiers in German lands, right? So to protect Germany, Wilhelm signed treaties with Austria and Italy, promising to protect them if the war broke out. Now, the thing about it, though, is this alliance is already kind of weak territorially and geographically out the gate, but they also are right smack in the middle of Europe. So they have a nickname, and their nickname is the Central Powers, right? So like the Central Powers because they are literally right smack in the center of Europe, right? So looking at this as well, though, the other side of the coin, their enemies, if you will, the other people that they are going to be in, so that when you read tonight, when you read the chapter 1 tonight, Paul, right, the main character of the story, is a German soldier, so he would have been fighting for the Central Powers. The people he's fighting against are primarily the French, but the biggest thing is they're also in an alliance system, and it's known as the Triple Entente. Now, we know two people that are in the Triple Entente already, and it's, of course, France and Russia. But really quick, what's an entente? An entente's a little bit of a weird concept because it's an informal agreement between countries. It's not, like, solidified by, like, necessarily dictates, paper, tariffs, all these other things. But the ententes were actually made casually between the other groups, right? Like France made an entente with Russia, and then France made an entente with Great Britain, and then Britain made an entente with Russia. So literally there were like several different ententes going on at the exact same time. But the groups that were in the Triple Entente were France, Russia, and Great Britain, right? AKA the Allies, right? They are also known as, their nickname is the Allies. Now, another little group you can put on next to this one, or tack on the next one really quick, you are like, oh, wait, can I put Italy on this list as well? You can if you want to, but there's another really, really important person that comes in when the war starts for the Allies. It's the Americans, right? The United States joins up in 1917, if you want to go ahead and have that in your notes, just so you can know about it going forward. Now, this one was weird, though, because France allied with Russia when the League of Three Emperors failed, and then France allied with Great Britain because of another big reason we'll talk about here in about 2 seconds. A lot of it's related to militarism and stuff like that. Basically what had happened is Great Britain got really mad at Germany, and so France sensed that and then made an entente with Great Britain, right? And then Britain also allied with Russia later on due to the fact that literally the entente had already been made between France and Russia and France and Great Britain, so Britain went ahead and allied with Russia. Now when we're looking at this though, this is the main alliance systems right here, and like a little screenshot if you're looking for them. You literally got right here the Triple Entente between Russia, France, and Britain. They're going to be supporters of Serbia, and then you also have the Triple Alliance, which is going to be Italy, Germany, Austria, Hungary. But right here, you got the Ottoman Empire that comes in 1914 in October, and then also Italy is going to switch sides and jump over there. So going forward as well, though, you need to understand this is our map of our alliances as well. Now, looking at this, you got to like look at it. Germany and Austria are already at a really, really bad spot because if the war breaks out today, they're going to have to fight a two-front war, right? Two-front war. Now, are the Germans going to try and strategize a way to avoid a two-front war? Of course they are. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's actually referred to as the Schlieffen Plan and stuff like that, where they tried to knock out France really, really early on, but it didn't really quite work out the way they had intended. Now, a big part of the World War I as well, or the causes of World War I, also include militarism, right? Now, militarism, what it is, right? Because we have it in our main causes, but we don't necessarily know what it is or know the definition of it. There are several different elements of militarism that are going to help lead to this war. So we just discussed our alliances, right? We got Germany, Austria, and Italy, and then they're going to be going against Great Britain, France, and Russia, right? And a lot of this is caused mainly just between the rivalry between France and Germany, right? So, but the thing about it is, though, is by the time all of this is getting geared up, by the time we're getting into like the 1900s, early 1900s, 1905, 1906, the thing you got to understand is that literally industrialism and the Industrial Revolution has played a massive effect on militaries, the way they produce goods, their size, their strength, and also militaries are now being used to expand the imperial colonies, right? So economic competition is going to fuel this between countries. Money, arms, weapons, colonies, every country wants to have more stuff in larger militaries than everybody else. And so when this all happens is they begin to start funneling all that money and stuff into the one thing that they can use that's better than a flag, that represents your country, and that's your military, right? And what militarism is the glorification or glory or building up of your military, right? And Germany made their army huge, right? Made it absolutely massive. Poured resources into their military. Now, granted, the Germans, of course, would do this. The military is the reason why Germany is a country, right? They fought through several different wars. The Second Schleswig War, they fought the Austro-Prussian War, the Franco-Prussian War, leading to their unification, and also the Prussian. The Prussians just love their military, right? So when we're looking at this, though, the militarist aspect of this is that economic competition is going to fuel the buildup of those militaries. The sad part about it is when you got a bunch of militaries, a lot of countries tend to want to use them, right? And the other scary part about militarism during this time period is the fact that this is creating a new industrial military. The Industrial Revolution is going to change so many things about life. You can buy cheap textiles now. You can buy cheap goods now. There is more supply, which means the demand is going down, so costs are actually going down. But also, the Industrial Revolution is going to affect the military. And militaries will never look the same because they'll be carrying different weapons that are more dastardly and destructive. They'll be carrying, they'll be able to get to the front lines much faster using locomotives and steamships and things like that. They'll be able to communicate over greater distances using new devices. The thing about it, though, is the thing that really is going to affect the military more than any other thing that came before it is the Maxim gun, of course, that came out in 1884, invented by a man named Hiram Maxim, right? It's a fully automatic machine gun, and this is Hiram Maxim himself sitting at his Maxim gun. And some of y'all are like, we've already talked about this, Mr. Terry. Yes, I know we've already talked about it, but now we have to talk about how multiple European nations now have these. It's not just the British that have them, not just the French, not just the Germans. They all have fully automatic weapons that can now, at this point in time, fire 600 rounds per minute. Now, it does have some drawbacks. The biggest drawback is the fact that it's heavy. It's got, the earliest models were on wheels. And then also later on, two men had to carry later ones. They jam every now and again. Water had to be used as well on it. Literally, the barrel had a water jacket around it, and that's what that little tube right there is for, to keep the thing from warping. And if you were actually on the battlefield in World War I and your water jacket ran out, you had to pee in the water jacket, which is a really, really aggressive thing. That's a lot of pressure. So now, the big thing about it, though, is that as the weapon began to advance, this is what they looked like when World War I actually broke out. They had small tripods on them. They were a little bit smaller and could be carried by about 2 guys, right? Now, the thing about it, though, is regardless of drawbacks, being heavy, it jams, and it needs water around the barrel and stuff like that, it still fires 600 rounds a minute. That is 6 shots per second, all right? So, 10 shots per second. It takes 1 bullet to kill a person. And there's 10 of them coming out of there a second. The Industrial Revolution is also changing, though, the warfare as we know it, because exactly the same reasons like we just talked about. Troops can now get to the lines faster with locomotives. They can now also send messages much further using telegraphs. And they can also now travel much quicker using steam-powered vessels, right? So now another element of militarism as well is going to be arms races that break out, particularly between 2 countries, right? There are 2 countries that get into a massive arms race with one another. And those 2 countries are, of course, Germany and Great Britain. Now, Great Britain was the industrial powerhouse going into this war. They're the ones where the Industrial Revolution began. They're the ones that started creating the steam engine, the James Watt steam engine, all these different devices and elements and items. But the thing about it is the Industrial Revolution is also going to create new inventions. Because just like the Maxim gun, they don't want to just sit there and rest on their laurels and only have that one device. The British come out with a brand new boat that the world has never seen, right? So there was a massive naval arms race because of the development of this boat between England and Germany, increasing the tension between them. And this is why Britain went off and signed the Entente with France, because of this industrial competition with Germany, and also due to the fact that the Germans were passing them up in industrial output. But the boat that changed the tide of the war, boat that changed the tide, the thing that changed the tide of the war was this device right here. It's known as the HMS Dreadnought, right? That right there is a fully steam-powered military vessel with 10-inch diameter cannons on the front of it that can fire as far as 2 miles inland into a nation or into an attacking country. The Dreadnought was massive, huge, scary, terrifying, and then the Germans saw it, and the Germans were like, all right, we're going to build some of our own. And they get into this arms race. They start trying to develop as many dreadnoughts as they can as well. Problem is the Germans didn't have the ability to produce as many dreadnoughts as the British did. So instead, the Germans decide to take a long shot, a Hail Mary, if you will. A very, very, very I don't know if we want to do this or not, Germany, but they do it anyway. And they bank on their own type of boat that they know how to build, and it's known as a submarine, right? Now, the thing about it, we'll talk about it a little bit in class. Submarines, but during this time period, were not as efficient or effective as the ones that you think of today. They didn't have sonar. They navigated in the blind using maps and stuff like that. Also, they could stay underwater for long periods of time, but they didn't move very fast and stuff like that. But the thing about it is, y'all, is if they don't have sonar, neither do dreadnoughts. What the Germans didn't realize at this point when they invested a lot of their money into submarines, which, by the way, in German, when you say submarine, it's Unterseeboot. Unter sie Boot. So literally, they didn't realize, because it means underwater boat. Now, so the thing about it, though, is they didn't realize that it was going to be as effective as it was. A dreadnought in the early phases of the war, actually, what the Germans didn't realize, stood no chance against an Unterseeboot, against a U-boat, because they couldn't see it, right? So now the last couple things as well that we'll talk about is nationalism is also going to really help lead to this war, right? Nationalism is going to fuel countries to want to be the best and the strongest. Now, the thing about it, you don't need to write this example, but think about it this way. When this war broke out, it was greeted by cheering crowds in Berlin, Vienna, and Paris. This guy, this author wrote, by the name of A.P.J. Taylor, wrote, "The people of Europe leapt willingly into war," right? So nationalism has fueled countries to want to be the biggest, the best, and the strongest, so they're going to want to go against each other to try and prove that dominance. And when y'all get back in class tomorrow, we're going to spend a little bit of extra time on notes and stuff like that, and we're going to talk about a couple extra new things. Particularly, we're going to talk about Pan-Slavism, the powder keg, and a little assassination story that y'all might have heard of before. But